Hey, everybody. Welcome, welcome, welcome. So glad to be here with all of you tonight. Hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, hit the notifications bell. We're having yet another one of our conversations. I'm out here in San Francisco for APEC. I'm here in my beautiful hotel room. I've got my webcam on. For some reason, Rumble isn't working, but I'm on YouTube. So hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, hit the notifications bell. Let's have another great late night conversation.
The American century. I say that the century on which we are entering can be and must be the century of the common man.
A radical redistribution of economic power.
I mean, we know that racism is just a byproduct of capitalism. Everything would be all right if everything was put back in the hands of the people.
We need a government that will make sure Americans are taken care of and organize the economy to serve the people, not the profits of a wealthy few.
We now have the techniques and the resources to get rid of poverty.
We got to start getting out there with the people.
Get out of the movement and get to the masses.
We need a government of action.
Welcome, 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 everybody. So glad to be here with all of you. So glad to engage with all of you tonight. Should be good. It's 5 p.m., just after dark here in San Francisco. And I had some time and I thought I might get on and have a late night conversation with all of you. Now, the way this generally works, even though we're traveling and on the road, and even though we're only on YouTube this afternoon, the way this generally works is that I give my opening remarks. That's just whatever it is I'm going to talk about. My opening remarks are then followed by a roll call where we find out who is watching. And then after we do the roll call, then I answer your super chat questions for the rest of the night. So if you got something you want me to talk about in the second half of our show, send me a super chat and that will give me something to talk about. I will answer your questions. That's how we will do it. So just a quick announcement, reminder for those of you who maybe haven't heard or have forgotten or whatever, we are having our National Center for Political Innovation convention. That is coming up on December 2nd in Portland, Oregon. Saturday, December 2nd, we are having our national convention. And it's going to be really, really awesome. And I mean, at this point, the list of speakers, we have got Craig Pasta Jardula, from the host of Convo Couch, the host of Jimmy Dore Show. He's coming to speak. We've got Garland Nixon, the great anti-imperialist streamer and webcaster and radio host. He's going to be there. Jyoti Brar, Garland Nixon, Scott Ritter. Who can forget Scott Ritter, the great military analyst? We got Lee Stranahan is going to be there. Lee Stranahan, the great radio host as well. David Rovix is going to be playing his music. Sayed Hassani, who is an anti-imperialist Iranian-American who supports Palestine. He's going to be speaking. It's going to be an all-around great event. So please go ahead and register for the conference. Please register for the conference. Let us know that you are coming. Sign up on the Eventbrite. That will be the way so that we know how much food to order when we order food for everybody and how much coffee to get and stuff like that. Make sure that you register so that we know that you are coming. Please register. And then on top of that, if you would like to help make this conference happen, because it's still a bit of a tight squeeze, we are not where we would ideally like to be in terms of budget. We do have enough money to do it, but more would make it a lot easier. So if you want to support the conference, please send us a donation. That would be great as well. Here's the link. You can give us a contribution on Give, Send, Go. That's a great way to help us out. So thank you, everybody. I just wanted to get that reminder out of the way. Special shout out to our president, Elizabeth Young, the president of the Center for Political Innovation, who is right now in Athens, Greece, for a very important meeting of the World Anti-Imperialist Platform. That's going on right now in Athens, Greece. The World Anti-Imperialist Platform, which is a regroupment of Marxists and anti-imperialists that support Russia in Ukraine, that support China on the island of Taiwan, that support people's Korea and call for peaceful reunification of the Korean Peninsula. All of them are gathering in Athens, Greece for a global meeting and we are really proud to be there. Along with the Party of Communists, which is a friendly organization. Chris Alulli is there. He'll also be speaking at our conference. So shout out to our members that are, our member Elizabeth Young, who is in Athens, Greece right now for this very, very important meeting. Shout out to Jyoti Brar, our good friend, who's going to this meeting. And then she's flying to the United States for our conference that's coming up. And shout out to Chris Alulli of the Party of Communists, who's there. It's really, really, really great to have folks in Athens, Greece. So check out the World Anti-Imperialist Platform, a really important group of communists from around the world who are anti-imperialist and stand with Russia and China. Just wanted to give a special shout out to their international conference that is happening right now in Greece. I was invited, but as you know, I'm here in San Francisco for the APEC Summit. I had to cover the APEC Summit, so I wasn't able to be there, but I am there in spirit. We love the World Anti-Imperialist Platform. We are proud to be signatories of their declaration. We love the World Anti-Imperialist Platform, so I just want to let people know about that. So like I said before, hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, hit the notifications bell. Send me a super chat. Give me something to talk about in the second half of our program. That would be greatly appreciated. And I will just get into it because there's a lot of different things to talk about here tonight. A lot of different things I could tell you all about. First of all, I can give you a quick rundown on recent events. I don't know if you saw, but President Xi Jinping went and met with Joe Biden, and it was a great meeting. They talked about improving relations between the two countries. They agreed to establish military contact so that the militaries are directly talking to each other once again, which is a very, very good step forward, so that something doesn't boil over in the Pacific. There's been a lot of situations where a plane flew close to a ship or a ship, was too close to another ship and this is a step away from World War III. So that's good. In addition to that, they agreed to form a joint task force for dialogue around the issue of drugs and narcotics. And then, of course, to close out the meeting, during his press conference, Joe Biden dropped a giant turd in the punch bowl, to borrow an expression from Alex Jones. He dropped a giant turd in the punch bowl, and he called Xi Jinping a dictator. Now, I look at that and I talk about undiplomatic language. That's just not what you say about a world leader when he's in town giving you a visit. You don't call him a dictator. And I also think about how stupid Joe Biden sounds saying this, because we all know that Joe Biden only got elected because the FBI went to Twitter and went to Facebook and said, don't allow anyone to share the Hunter Biden laptop story. The secret police of America, the FBI, went to those who control the means of social media information and told them about certain stories not to share and promote. That's why Joe Biden won the 2020 election. He basically rigged the election by suppressing information about his opponent, by suppressing information. And so there's that. On top of that, what is Joe Biden doing right now? He's trying to put Donald Trump in prison so that Donald Trump can't run against him in the 2024 election. He's trying to basically imprison Donald Trump in order to get reelected. He has put scores of January 6th protesters in prison for really long times just for walking into the Capitol, 21 years, 15 years, ridiculous charges. He's indicted the Uhuru movement, the African People's Socialist Party. He's indicted them as Russian agents because they dared protest against his war and his escalation in Ukraine and his proxy war against Russia and Ukraine. So Joe Biden has no grounds on which to call anybody a dictator. He should shut his fucking mouth. Really, really offensive, nasty remarks. But I don't think they were just off the cuff. This is a game they try to play with Joe. They try to say, oh, Joe's just an old man. He's just an old man. And you're on the list. He's just an old man. And he speaks out the side of his mouth. Bullshit. Bullshit. This was a planned comment. The reporter asked, do you still think Xi Jinping is a dictator? And he answered the question. Now, maybe Antony Blinken wasn't happy about how it was said or whatever, but I don't think this was accidental. And a lot of this meeting, the way it was staged, was purely for electoral purposes. The whole thing about the fentanyl, right? There's all of this claim that somehow China is responsible for the fentanyl thing. That's Republicans, right? They're playing up the idea because a lot of the red states have really suffered from the opioid epidemic. And fentanyl is a cheaper version of heroin. It is not made from opium poppies. It's made synthetically from chemicals, but it feels like heroin. It's a lot worse for you than heroin. It kills you a lot faster than heroin does. It's called fentanyl. And they're trying to play up the idea that it came from China. Well, that's not exactly true. China produces a lot of pharmaceutical chemicals that are used for all kinds of different reasons. You go to the store and you buy some aspirin, you take aspirin for a headache. There's a good chance that one of the chemicals in there came from China. China, if you go to get prescription drugs, there's a lot of chemicals, that are synthetically created for pharmaceutical purposes that are made in China. It turns out some of those chemicals can also be mixed up into fentanyl, right? However, here's the thing. None of the fentanyl is being made in China. It's just people using chemicals that are already made in China and mixing them up here in America in order to make fentanyl. And, they find these fentanyl labs all the time. They're kind of like meth labs. They blow up. They're dangerous chemicals and all of that. But the fentanyl that Americans are taking is largely mixed up right here. It just so happens that they are using chemicals that are made in China, but those chemicals can be used in other pharmaceutical products as well. So the idea that China is responsible for fentanyl abuse in America, bullshit, just bullshit, right? China makes a lot of pharmaceutical chemicals, and people can acquire, somebody can buy it from somebody who buys it from somebody who steals it from somebody who, and that may lead to somebody mixing up these chemicals to make fentanyl. But the idea that China is allowing fentanyl to be smuggled into the United States, bullshit. In China, they have the death penalty. If you were caught sneaking drugs out of China, you get the death penalty. If you're caught sneaking drugs into China, you get the death penalty, and rather quickly too. They execute you pretty quickly for using drugs in China. It's about a couple weeks after they catch you, you're dead. Not saying that that's a good policy necessarily. I know why China does it, because it's a kill or be killed situation. These drug gangs that operate in Central Asia are murderous organizations. And the way they operate is they go to families and they say, we want to use your house as a drug smuggling, house. And they say no. And they point the gun at their head and they say, we're going to kill you if you don't do it. So the only way the government can have the same level of threat is they need to be able to say, well, if you do it, they're going to kill you also. Right. And it's like a military kind of situation. It's not a good situation, but, these drug gangs, these vicious heroin gangs are pretty awful. They're pretty awful. And, and so in order to fight them, it's almost like you need to have a level of military force, it's a situation there. But the idea that China is responsible for the fentanyl epidemic is bullshit. But that was a big part of the meeting, and that was a big part of Xi Jinping's remarks last night at the banquet, was emphasizing how concerned they are about drugs, how China cares about Americans who struggle from addiction and all of that, and that that it was really trying to deal with this Republican disinformation that China is responsible for the drug problem. And and that's why Xi Jinping made his big comment about how sympathetic he is, how sympathetic he is to families who suffer from drug addiction, have relatives or people that suffer from it. And that's why Biden made a big point of bringing it up with Xi Jinping. So he could say to those Republicans, well, I stuck it to Xi Jinping. I called him a dictator. And so I think this is all performative. But as much as the media is focusing on Biden's negative comment, calling Xi Jinping a dictator, I think what happened yesterday is a real step forward, a very, very big step forward, because Xi and Biden met. And other than one passing remark, other than that, it seems like military contract was reestablished. I think this was actually a victory. Believe it or not. As hard as it might be to admit that, and as much as U.S. media is trying to cover it up, and as much as Joe Biden's trying to be defensive and say, no, I yelled at him, I called him a dictator, I think this was actually a step forward in U.S.-China relations. I think a good thing happened here in San Francisco yesterday. I think yesterday was a good day for world peace. Yesterday was a good day for international cooperation. So, yeah, that's what I would argue. I think today was a good day. That is my position. And that's how I feel. Now, I was not in the meeting. The meeting didn't actually take place at the APEC summit. I'm credentialed for the APEC summit. I can go into the APEC summit. There's not much going on in there. I'll just tell you that much. The actual APEC summit, pretty dead. Not much going on in there. There's the San Francisco Public Library has given away free books about the history of Alcatraz Island. There's some Zen Buddhist meditation, groups that are out leafleting. They've got videos showing about how San Francisco is a great place to do business. Not much really happening at the APEC summit. It's actually pretty dead. The meeting happened at a wealthy estate called Filoli Estates, which is like a huge mansion about 20 minutes outside the city of San Francisco. That's where the meeting actually took place. It's worth noting. And you're all on the list. All these questions are great, and they're all on the list. I look forward to answering them in the second half of our program. And thank you. Keep the super chats rolling in. Give me something to talk about. So I didn't actually get to go to the meeting, but I was outside because there were, probably thousands. I mean, they were spread out in different areas. So the area that I was in, there was hundreds, but there were probably, if you went over the whole city, there were thousands of Chinese people, Chinese Americans, and others that were out here to greet Xi Jinping. And it was really, 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 really great to be out in the streets with these Chinese folks. And they're U.S. citizens largely. A lot of them spoke English. A lot of them were, but they were there to celebrate Xi Jinping, and to celebrate the possibility of U.S. relations with China improving, And so I thought I would just show you all the video of these crowds. So one thing that I saw all over, well, I'll talk about that later, but yeah, here's the video of the crowd of people that I was with yesterday who were out there to greet Xi Jinping. I've just got to stop the video right here because there was some idiot on social media claiming that there were no American flags. There were tons of American flags in this crowd, mind you. They had mainly Chinese flags, but there were plenty of American flags. These were patriotic Americans of Chinese descent who want to improve U.S. relations with China. And I will say this was a crowd of very, very dedicated protesters. They were out there all day long, from like 7 in the morning until 10 at night. Around 10 o'clock at night, they started going home, but they were out there all day long. And they weren't just in this area. They were also in the area near the Filoli Estates where Xi Jinping arrived. They were also in other parts of the city. Very, very dedicated group of people. All ages, young, middle-aged, children, parents, grandparents, all out there to support Xi Jinping. I thought that was very, very neat. It was very, very cool to see that big outpouring. Now, of course, I did that thing that I do where I go up to people and argue. And there was a Tibet separatist. There was this guy who, is an anti-China Tibet separatist. So I did argue with him. In case you missed the video, I'll show you that. That was, I like to do that. I like to confront people that are, and you're on the list. I like to confront, anti-communists out in the street. I like to I like to make my opinion known, as you all are aware. So I made a point of confronting this Tibet separatist dude who was out there trying, white dude out there saying he wants to break apart Tibet. We had an argument that I think it was important to post on social media, and it got around Chinese social media. My friend Sophia, who has a Chinese social media channel, posted it, and it's actually gotten quite a bit of play online. Sir, did you know Heinrich Harrer, who wrote 7 Years in Tibet, was actually a Nazi, a member of Hitler's SS?
He was late, a lot of people were Nazis back then, yes.
A lot of people were Nazis back then?
Yes.
And the Dalai Lama was admired by fascists like Julius Evola and others because they had an authoritarian regime where people were serfs, they had their eyes gouged out.
Enough, man, come on.
Tibet was not a paradise before the serfs rose up. Right?
You're assuming a lot about
lies.
No,
Hollywood lies, right? The Chinese Communist Party has raised millions of people out of
they
poverty.
Are so great.
They have built
They didn't
millions.
kill 30 million people.
How many people did they kill?
When Mao had his crazy kind of quotas for agriculture and stuff.
Yeah, they cured starvation. There was starvation every day before the communists came in.
You're a true believer.
Is that not true? Who built modern farming in China? Who brought tractors to the Chinese countryside? You're repeating State Department war propaganda. The Tibet separatist movement is just like the Contras of Nicaragua. It's just like the Netanyahu supporters in Israel. It's a pro-imperialist movement. You're trying to destroy China, which is the hope of this world. They're building highways and trains all across the planet, and people all over the world have been lifted out of poverty by the Chinese Communist Party. You're here supporting a separatist movement trying to tear apart one of the best countries in the world. You should be ashamed of yourself. You should be ashamed of yourself. You're promoting Buddhist fascism, Buddhist serfdom. You're out here, look at all these people who celebrate Xi Jinping.
You're a communist.
That's right. That's right. I'm a communist. Just like the people who saved us from fascism. Just like the people who liberated Auschwitz concentration camp. Yeah. Yes. Unlike the Dalai Lama, who was a fascist, who was admired by Hitler. Yes, I'm a communist. Yes, I admire the millions of people lifted out of poverty by the Chinese Communist Party. When this government was executing and torturing Black Panthers, the Mao and the Chinese Communists welcomed the Black Panthers to the United States. You are completely on the side of the imperialists. You are on the side of Wall Street. You are out here trying to tear apart China. You're trying to help break apart China for Wall Street. You should be ashamed of yourself. China is the future. There's one China. Tibet is China. Taiwan is China. Hong Kong is China. There's one China. Tibet is part of China. You're trying to break apart China for Wall Street. You should be ashamed of yourself. One China. One China. The Chinese Communist Party has raised more. One China. 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 Yep. So, I mean, if it wasn't for social media, it wouldn't be worth doing that kind of thing. But, I like to do it because people will hear the arguments that I make. They can learn about the issue. It's good social media. So I encourage you, if you're someplace and that somebody shows up and wants to debate you or something, start filming them. Film your argument with them. First of all, it'll make them go away because they don't like being filmed. Second of all, it'll then let the argument go online and people will see it. So, I don't know. Is it really the best thing to do? People are like, were you being mean to an old man? Well, he was out there being mean to China with his Tibet separatist flag, and there's all kinds of Chinese people out there who really want peace between the two countries. And so I figured, hey, confront him, make a video out of it. And apparently it was a hit on Chinese social media. It's already circulating. So, I do these things. And, it's worth doing these things. But in the lead up to, he's fair game. Is that Scientology terminology, right? I think that's what Scientology calls enemies of Scientology, fair game. So that guy he's a fair game guy. L. Ron Hubbard would be proud, but I'm joking, of course. But no, it's worth having these arguments so that other people see it. Other people see it. Other people hear it. It's important. And also it was a white dude, because I've made videos like this where I confront Miami Cubans. I confront, but this guy was actually This guy was actually a white dude who was out there calling to break apart China, right? I mean, so in this case, I think he's much more fair game than, if this guy was actually Tibetan, even though the majority of the Tibetans support the Chinese Communist Party, feel that, or really like the highways and the hospitals and the schools and the poverty alleviation programs. Well, that guy, he's a white dude out there who probably watched 7 Years in Tibet. He probably loves, what's his name? Will Gear or Richard Gere in Hollywood, and he's into that whole mystical thing, and that leads him to hate China. He thinks he understands China because he goes to some mystical Buddhist workshops, and he doesn't understand the history there of and I always tell people, that look, Christianity, my religion, has been used for a lot of evil in the world. I'm not against Buddhism, right? Buddhism is a beautiful religion. However, the Dalai Lama used Buddhism for feudalism, to oppress people. There's many people around the world that use Buddhism as a way to protest wars, as a way to have meditation, as a way to stand up for truth and social justice. People can use Buddhism for good. I think there's some spiritual power in Buddhism. It's not my particular faith, but I think there's something there. But the Dalai Lama and the Tibet separatist movement, they use Buddhism for evil, just like in the medieval times, the Catholic Church used Christianity for the Crusades and for slavery and things like that. Just like, Islam, there's a lot of beauty in that faith, but we know that Osama bin Laden and people like that used Islam for bad things, right? And it's not about hating any religion or saying that one religion's better than another. It's not about that. It's about opposing forces that are working for the imperialists. And that's what Tibetan separatism is. And that brings me to another thing that I just want to comment on. I noticed today a letter, one of these video messages that Osama bin Laden gave is going viral, right? And this is one of the sickest social media psyops I've ever seen. But Osama bin Laden, he was a leader. He was a guy that the United States used to fight the Soviet Union. He ran a Wahhabi counter gang to fight the Soviet Union and Afghanistan, to fight against communism. He's one of the wealthiest people from one of the wealthiest families in Saudi Arabia, which was like a U.S. vassal state, a U.S. client state, basically set up by the Sykes-Picot Agreement to funnel oil to the British Empire and to the United States imperialists. He made a video message prior to his death where he said that because people in America support Israel and support sending weapons to Israel, that terrorism against Americans is justified. Well, that's wrong, right? Because revolutionaries, first of all, understand that targeting civilians, murdering innocent people is never justified, number one. Number two, that terrorism as a strategy does not work. It leads to the alienation of revolutionaries and anti-imperialist forces, and it leads to isolation from the masses, right? The goal of serious revolutionaries is to build a mass movement with a base among the population, and that the masses of people in their millions are the makers of history, not some isolated group of people that would engage in some kind of, dramatic, horrendous act of violence. Revolutionaries have always opposed killing innocent people. They've always opposed terrorism and left adventurism and things like that. But a lot of leftists, all of a sudden, in light of events in Gaza, are making videos about how smart they think Osama bin Laden was. This is a psyop, right? Because, look, 9/11 was a horrendous thing. Now, we all have questions about the official story. And, the official story of 9/11 doesn't add up in a lot of ways. I don't tell people what actually happened because I don't know. But I do know the official story, it doesn't sound right. But the idea of all kinds of people that are pro-Palestine praising Osama bin Laden, that's a psyop, right? And the idea is that if some kind of horrendous terror attack or false flag happens, they'll be able to point at us and say, oh, look, these people were supporting Osama bin Laden, right? It's a psyop. Don't fall for it. Do not fall for it. That's what I would urge you. Do not fall for it, right? Genuine revolutionaries have always opposed terrorism. Osama bin Laden was an agent of U.S. imperialism. He fought on the side of the U.S. imperialists in Afghanistan. He fought on the side of the U.S. imperialists, in the Iraq-Iran war when the USA was backing Iran against Iraq. And obviously that shifted. He fought on the side of the U.S. imperialists in Chechnya. He fought on the side of the U.S. imperialists everywhere. He was on the side of the U.S. imperialists, right? Osama bin Laden was from a wealthy family and a super wealthy family in a U.S. client state of Saudi Arabia. And he was not an anti-imperialist. He just was not an anti-imperialist. And after 9/11, there was a huge moment where the government of Cuba, the government of Libya under Gaddafi, the government of Saddam Hussein in Iraq, they offered to help the United States, the government of Syria, all right, because they've been fighting people like Osama bin Laden for years, right? And they thought this is a moment where we can be on the same side, right? Gaddafi even offered to torture people to help get Osama bin Laden because the USA had been backing Al-Qaeda types to fight against Osama bin Laden for years. Russia has been dealing with people like this. They offered to help the United States, right? The whole anti-imperialist world, every socialist and anti-imperialist country hated Osama bin Laden and saw the moment when an attack happened in the United States, in which Osama bin Laden was blamed for it, as a moment where they were offering to help America. They said, we're on the same team because we've been fighting against it. And maybe now you guys will wake up and stop giving guns to these nut jobs, which has been U.S. foreign policy for a long time, right? Started with Brzezinski in the 70s, giving guns and weapons to radical Islamic extremists. Iran has repeatedly denounced bin Laden. Very, very true. Right. Very, very, very true. I'll talk about that in the Q&A, but there's more there. There's more to that story actually. There's a long story there. But yeah, I mean, it's very, very, very clear that Osama bin Laden wasn't an anti-imperialist. And for whatever reason, he made some statements in a video about the Palestinians and about Americans not taking responsibility for their government's actions or whatever. Do not fall for it. And don't be one of these leftists who sees it trending on social media and thinks it's hip and cool to say, oh, I'm with bin Laden. The American people deserve to. Don't do it. Don't do it. Do not do it. And this is the oldest PSYOP in the world. And I'll actually tell you, this PSYOP started right after 9/11. Right after 9/11, there was a college professor. He's the top professor of Native American studies in the United States. And they made him the face of leftism. Bill O'Reilly did 100 episodes of his show about this guy. And he was a college professor at the University of Colorado, Ward Churchill. And they made him the face of anti-imperialism because he wrote an essay basically saying that. And he wrote this essay that I read when I was a teenager. You can find it online. It's called Some People Push Back. And it's about 9/11. And the essay, it uses very fiery, angry language. But the essay is complete bull honky. And I'll explain to you why, right? So this guy, Ward Churchill, he's the top Native American scholar in the United States. The top Native American scholar. And he's not actually Native American. Which is another side note. He's, ethnically, he's like 1/42nd Native American, this guy, Ward Churchill, he's the top Native American scholar. And after 9/11, he wrote this essay called Some People Push Back. And in that essay, he said that the sanctions on Iraq, mind you, the sanctions on Iraq had killed all these innocent children. And because the American people didn't go out and protest against it, they were basically fair game for the terrorists. That the American people, the people who worked in the Twin Towers, he called them little Eichmanns, said that they were little Eichmanns because they were complicit in the crimes of America, blah, 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 blah. Well, here's the thing. Here's the thing, right? Iraq did not attack America on 9/11. Iraq had nothing to do with 9/11. Do you know who said Iraq had something to do with 9/11? And lied about it? George W. Bush. But before George W. Bush even got around to it, this guy wrote this essay saying that, oh, well, the American people aren't protesting the bombing of Iraq and the sanctions on Iraq that killed all these children. So 9/11 was justified, etc. Right? He wrote that. Now, and then Fox News made him famous, so to speak. right? They put his face all over the media and they played him up. And I was a high school kid and I was against the war in Iraq. So I went and bought all of the Ward Churchill books. I bought his book On the Justice of Roasting Chickens. I bought his book, A Little Matter of Genocide. I bought, every Ward Churchill book I could find because I thought, oh, this guy's a revolutionary. And I noticed that every single one of his books has a dig at communism in it. Every single one has an attack on communism. Communism is a white man's ideology. The communists kill indigenous people just as much, etc. I thought that was so weird. And then I found out who Ward Churchill actually is. You ready for this? Ward Churchill is a CIA asset. Ward Churchill was the speechwriter of Russell Means. If people know who Russell Means was. Russell Means was the leader of the American Indian movement, which was like the Native American wing of the Black Panthers in the 1970s. And, they did a lot of very heroic things. They occupied government buildings, etc. And they were heavily persecuted by the FBI. The FBI went after the American Indian movement a lot. Pretty viciously. It was COINTELPRO. They targeted them. And the leader of the American Indian movement, the top leader of the American Indian movement was this guy, Russell Means. And he met with the Black Panthers and he was supported by the Soviet Union, etc. Anyhow, there started to be a fight among the American Indian movement about whether they should be anti-imperialist and align themselves with Russia and China, or whether or not they should basically sell out. And there is a woman who got killed, Anna Mae Aquash, I believe was her name, right? She was a Native American activist who got on the wrong side. She got on the wrong side of some of the people in the American Indian movement, and she got murdered, I believe, if I'm not mistaken. She got disappeared. No one really knows who killed her, but it was clear there was a fight going on inside the American Indian movement, and she was found dead. She was offed. And she was more anti-imperialist and more revolutionary. And Anna Mae Aquash, she got disappeared, right? Somebody killed Anna Mae Aquash. A very, very tragic story, And we also know that Leonard Peltier, the Native American activist, went to federal prison. And Anna Mae Aquash, who was a militant, who was a heroic leader, she ended up getting disappeared. Well, in the 1980s, Russell Means, the leader of the American Indian movement, Russell Means, he became a propagandist for the American government. In Nicaragua, the U.S. government was raging a war against the Sandinistas. And so Russell Means started getting funding from the American government and going around promoting the idea that the Sandinistas of Nicaragua were oppressing the indigenous people. And he made propaganda films for the American government about this. And he became an American government propagandist, Russell Means. And suddenly he started being the Native American in all the Hollywood movies. You look at his Wikipedia page, all of a sudden, at the same time he's making propaganda for the American government to attack Nicaragua. All of a sudden, he starts getting roles in Hollywood movies, and he's been in a number of Hollywood movies. Russell Means was in many Hollywood movies. Suddenly his career started taking off, and he just got to be the Indian in a lot of Hollywood movies. Well, at the time that he was going around and demonizing Nicaragua and demonizing Nicaragua and sending weapons to the Contra terrorists, etc., who was his speechwriter? Who was it who wrote all of his propaganda speeches against the Nicaraguan government? Who was it? It was this white dude named Ward Churchill. Ward Churchill was the guy who basically became Russell Means' ghostwriter, wrote his speeches for him, and helped him make propaganda to attack Nicaragua with. So, of course, Ward Churchill, despite the fact that he's not even really Native American, he's barely Native American by heritage, he moved up. He got to be the top Native American scholar, and all of this. And, of course, he hates Americans. The average Americans are the enemy. Average American working people are the enemy. 9/11 was great because average Americans got killed. He's a new left guy. He hates communists, and he very much admires indigenous cultures around the world. He hates communists, and he basically got to the top of American academia and got to be this big name American leftist, right? He got to be the top Native American activist, basically because he made propaganda to support the U.S. Arming the Contras in Nicaragua, and he's a vicious anti-communist, and that's Ward Churchill. And after 9/11, he pushed this narrative that Osama bin Laden was a hero, that Osama bin Laden was a great hero, and that that the people of America are complicit and they deserve to die. Blah 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 blah. Don't go there, right? It's hate your neighbor, basically. That's basically what it is. It's kind of weaponizing people's resentment, and it's a trap. The only way out of imperialism is for the American people to align with the people of the world, to stand arm in arm with the people of the world, and to oppose the big monopolies. And if you have the attitude that the American people are the enemy, and if you support acts of terrorism that kill Americans, the American people are never going to listen to you. And that this diversion to make socialism and anti-imperialism not about how we can mobilize the people in our neighborhoods and communities to fight for their rights and stand in solidarity with the oppressed people of the world, but instead to make it about, I feel alienated, I'm mad, no one understands me, to make it this kind of teenage adolescent alienation, to make it teenage Satanism, so to speak. That is one of the CIA operations. And that's why Ward Churchill got blasted all over the media. That's why he got to be the top Native American scholar. He pushed a narrative after 9/11 that Osama bin Laden was a good guy. Osama bin Laden was not a good dude. He murdered all kinds of Afghan women for teaching women to read, right? They had literacy campaigns. They would throw acid in the faces of women who didn't wear their headscarves with acid attacks. He was funded by the American government to just murder people all throughout Afghanistan, and to murder people in Chechnya, to try and break apart Russia, break apart the Soviet Union. And somehow, we don't know the details of which, then towards the end of his life, he was involved in an attack that killed a lot of Americans also. But his whole life, Osama bin Laden was a wealthy Saudi billionaire who preached Islamic fundamentalism and anti-communism and killed lots of innocent people, and was heavily embedded with one of the main proxy governments of the United States in that region, the Saudis. So Osama bin Laden was not an anti-imperialist in any way. And his ideology and his practice of murdering innocent civilians, his ideology of we're going to turn back the clock and we're going to restore the 1400s, his Wahhabi worldview is not a revolutionary anti-imperialist view. That was the ideology of the people that overthrew Gaddafi in Libya for the United States. They were tied up with bin Laden. The people that fought in Syria to overthrow Assad, they were tied up with bin Laden. The people in Iran that are trying to break apart Iran and want to separate northern Iran and break Iran apart and set up a Sunni caliphate in northern Iran. Everywhere you go in the world, the Wahhabi forces, say my wife back in New York is watching. The Wahhabi forces, you make me smile, darling. You make me smile. The Wahhabi forces, they are always on the side of the American government. Always on the side of the American government. And they are not anti-imperialist in any conceivable way. So that needs to be made clear. Don't fall into the trap of thinking bin Laden's a good guy. Support, the people of the Middle East, Ba'athist Arab socialism, support the Islamic Revolution of Iran, support Cuba, support Venezuela, support China, support Russia, but don't support Osama bin Laden. Osama bin Laden is a murderer, an agent of the imperialists, and all the anti-imperialist forces in the world couldn't stand that guy, right? And the fact that that's the anti-imperialism they want to go viral, right? And they want to taint those of us in the United States who support the Palestinians with supporting him, right? And that's the whole narrative that the Zionists are pushing right now, is if you support Hamas, you support terrorism. If you support the Palestinians, you support terrorism. So don't fall into the trap. Do not fall into the trap, right? Osama bin Laden was used by the West against secular Islamic countries. Boom. Rupert gets it. He was used against Syria. He was used against Iran. He was used against Libya. He was used against the Soviet Union. He was used against the Yemeni people. He was always used always used by the imperialists, and all of the money to fund his operations came from America, and all his weapons came from the United States. Don't fall into the trap. That is one thing I really want to urge you all to do. Just do not fall into that trap. That is a bit of advice I wanted to give you all. Other news. I just wanted to play this clip. I just thought this was amusing. So, I don't like to highlight. I get so much harassment, and it's been going on for years now. There's so many people online who have made it their mission to let you all know what an evil person I am, why you should never listen to me, why I'm not a real Marxist, blah, 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 blah. And I actually try not to consume a lot of that material because most of it is just gutter level, right? I mean, it's not about politics. It's not about me being wrong about anything. It's always just attacking me on a personal level. I'm a bad person, attacking me around my personal life, things like that. Well, so I generally try not to watch attack content, right? But every so often, some of it comes across that is so ridiculous, so utterly ridiculous, that I have to highlight it. This one I wanted to show you all, just a small clip. So there's some guy, I don't even know what his name is, and it doesn't matter, I'm not going to say it, but this person, he was going through the PDF of my book, Bread Tube Serves Imperialism, and he's trying to own me like I'm not a real Marxist, right? And he's reading through my book, and they always do this thing where they'll read one sentence and they'll be like, oh, he didn't say blah, 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 blah. And then I say it in the next sentence, or they read it and they say, well, by this he means blah, 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 blah. And I don't mean that and all that. But this was absolutely classic. Okay. So this guy's supposed to be an expert on Marxism, and he's reading through my book, Bread Tube Serves Imperialism. He's reading through it, and he's just showing, oh, Caleb doesn't know anything about Marxism. This guy he's an idiot. I know everything there is to know about Marxism. Not Caleb. He's an idiot. You got to love this. Classic moment.
Worker cooperatives are not bad, but the fetishization of them and the rejection of the need to eliminate the anarchy of production? What? Anarchy of production. Is that a term he introduced earlier? Is that a Kropotkin term? I don't know. We'll run with he explains this earlier. Oh. Yeah, here we go.
Did you catch that? He's trying to tell you all how dumb I am. And he's never even heard the phrase anarchy of production. He's sitting there and he reads anarchy of production. What's that? Anarchy of production. Is that a Kropotkin term? You can't make this up.
Worker cooperatives are not bad, but the fetishization of them and the rejection of the need to eliminate the anarchy of production? What? Anarchy of production. Is that a term he introduced earlier? Is that a Kropotkin term? I don't know.
This is ridiculous. He's trying to tell you that I'm stupid. He spends his whole stream just inserting words in my mouth and attacking me. But there's a really basic Marxist concept called the anarchy of production. It's even got a Wikipedia page. It's really basic. And if you understand what we understand on this stream about the tendency of the falling rate of profit, about the problem of overproduction, if you know real Marxism at all, you would know that the anarchy of production is one of the main critiques of capitalism, that profits are in command, not human reason, not central planning. That is the main critique of capitalism, the anarchy of production. That we don't have houses so people can live in them. We have houses so landlords and banks can make money from them. We don't have food so people can eat it. We have food so that, big box stores and big pharma, or not big pharma, but, big agribusiness can make money from it. The anarchy of production, right? This is very, very basic stuff. Very, very basic stuff. And he's trying to lecture me. He's going on to his streams, calling me stupid and all this. And it's like, and then this moment comes across where he doesn't even know what the anarchy of production is. And that right there just tells you that, social media is so unbelievably rigged, and it's just like, it's just never ending. And I don't generally like to even bother to respond to these. I didn't even name this person because he's nobody. But I wanted you all to see that, because that's the level of people that they get, right? And Yeah, and so I am very thankful, very, very thankful for my community, for the Center for Political Innovation. We're doing great stuff. We have a great event planned coming up December 2nd. We're just going to focus on building our community, organizing, and trying to get a group of people together, maintain a network of anti-imperialist forces, in the United States, which is very hard to do. It's very difficult to do, but we're going to do it because we have no real other choice. We have to build a community of anti-imperialists. It is urgent that we do it. And I'm at the point where I almost feel like we should thank the woke people. We should thank them because what the woke people did, wokeism is basically, if you take everything good out of Marxism and you just take the bad, you take some of our negative traits. That's what wokeism is. And that's helpful because they've taken everything bad out of Marxism and set it on display for us. So we can keep the good and not do that, right? Wokeism, all of the negative stuff in the history of our movement, they have isolated and concentrated it all for us. And we can look at wokeism and say, that's not what we want to be, right? Wokeism is about destruction and resentment. We don't want to be. We have to build the city building tendency. We have to be optimistic. Wokeism is about pessimism. It's about thinking there is no future, there is no hope. Well, we can now see them taking and refining the pessimism, and now we can separate ourselves from that, and we can be optimistic, right? The woke movement is anti-human and Malthusian. It views human beings as the problem. It has contempt for the masses of people. We can now pull that out of our movement and we can love humanity, right? And that everything negative in our movement, vengeance, jealousy, destruction, anti-populism, anti-humanism, pessimism, glorification of violence, glorification of destruction, all of that we can expunge, we can clean from our movement. Because now the wokes have taken it and they're against us. They have nothing to do with us, right? They don't like what we do. And so we can let them take all of the negativity, all the bad stuff that has been kind of a plague in our movement. There has been a lot of jealousy and resentment and vengeance in our movement. There has been a lot of anti-populism and Malthusianism in our movement. There has been a lot of pessimism and all that. They can just take it all and go. Right. And we can now have a movement as Marxists that is cleansed of all the poison that the woke people have embraced. Right. And they can take all that poison and they can go and be woke, and we can do Marxism and socialism and optimism, and we can be the city building tendency, and we can do our thing without their baggage. They're taking all of our baggage and leaving. They're cleaning out the basement. It's kind of like Marxism has had a dirty basement full of crap, full of a bunch of old, rotting crap, right? For a long time, right? As successful as we have been as a movement, right? We raised millions of people out of poverty. We defeated the Nazis. We invented space travel. We turned China into a superpower. We fought for racial equality. We fought for the rights of women. I mean, we've done so many good things, but at the same time, we've got a beautiful house, but we got a crappy basement. A crappy basement full of old, rotting, falling apart stuff. Well, now the woke people have cleaned out our basement for us, right? They don't want the house. They don't want the house. They don't want the mansion. They don't want all the good stuff we do. They disavow the Soviet Union. They disavow China. They disavow Vietnam. They disavow Venezuela, Nicaragua. They disavow Christianity. They disavow optimism. They disavow, the city building tendency. They disavow hope and optimism and building a community of solidarity and resistance. They disavow all of that. All they're taking is the crap in our basement. And they can have it. Let them take the crap in our basement. You can take all the pessimism out of our basement. You can take all of the anti-humanism out of our basement. You can take all of the negativity out of our basement, all the jealousy, all the resentment, all the alienation. Just take it, clean out the basement. Take it out. The woke people have come over to our mansion and they want some of our stuff, but the only part of our stuff that they want is the bad. That's all that they want. They only want the bad. So please come and clean out our basement. You can have all of the rotten crap in our basement. You can have the guillotines. You can have the gulags. You can have the firing squads. You can have the jealousy, the resentment, the anti-human sentiments, the bloodlust, the punishment, the vengeance. You can have it all. Just clean out our basement. You can have it all. You can have all the bad shit in our basement that we need to get rid of. Take it. Just take it. Please. You're doing us a favor. Please take all the crap out of our basement. And now we can have the beautiful mansion that we've built, and they can go do their woke thing somewhere else, right? That is what we should view it as, right? Wokeism is spring cleaning for Marxism. It is spring cleaning for Marxism. That's all it is, and we should appreciate it because we're building something different. We are building an optimistic movement, a movement that is hopeful, a movement that is constructive, a movement that believes in truth. That's what we are building. Thank you very much, folks. Those are my opening remarks for tonight. So hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, hit the notifications bell. Let's do the roll call. I'll call you all out as I see you. Names and locations. And then we got some super chats to answer. Names and locations. Who is with us tonight? Names and locations. Names and locations. Who is with us? Names and locations. We got Gonzalo, and he is in Argentina. Welcome. Names and locations. Ryan in Kansas City. Rupert in England. John Whitty in Houston. Georgia. Firsty in Georgia. Welcome, Firsty. Ryan in Kansas City. Neil Fraser in Hong Kong. Chester in England. Jenny Lynn in Cincinnati. Chris in Salt Lake City. Patch in Arizona. Ghetto parts of Los Angeles. Seneca, South Carolina. Welcome. Bob Troy in New York. Mohsen from Iran. Finn in Duluth. A Better America in Michigan. Meredith and Quinn will be there on December 2nd. I am so excited to meet you guys. I am really excited to meet you guys. This is going to be awesome. The Seasoned Noob in China. Phil Sang in Miami, Florida. Timoshenko in St. Louis. Jamie in St. Paul. Victory for Yahuru, Germany. Mariah in North Carolina. Shout out to you, Mariah. Good luck. Tatiana in Fort Worth. Catalonia, Spain. Pios. Patrick in Maine. Hands Off Yahuru. Phil DeBreeze in Hackensack, New Jersey. Salute in Chicago. English in Montreal. Welcome. Names and locations. Terry in the Lord's Kingdom. Shout out to you, Terry. Micah in Las Vegas. Welcome. Names and locations, right? Names and locations. Caitlin in Richmond says, hi, Caleb. Hi, Caitlin. Zach Brunch in Richmond, Virginia. Shout out to you, Zach. John McCarthy in Chicago. Shout out to you. Briggy in Pennsylvania. Gabby in Chicago. All love to my comrades. All love to you, Gabby, and to Briggy, and to John, and to Zach, and to Caitlin, and Micah, and Terry, and everybody. Much love in our community. There is so much love in our community. We are building a community of solidarity dedicated to spreading anti-imperialism and optimism and hope all over this country. And we're very, very excited. Let's all be praying for the safe return of our president, Elizabeth Young, who is right now in Greece, in Athens, Greece, at a global gathering of anti-imperialist forces of the World Anti-Imperialist Platform. Let's pray for her safe return from Athens. It's going to be a very, very important trip, and let's all be thinking about the upcoming conference in Portland. It's going to be utterly, utterly amazing. I'm going to be on a plane to Portland pretty soon myself, so if you can help us out with the conference, if you can attend, please make a point of being there. If you can send a donation, that would be great. Let's all do everything we can to make Portland a smashing success. Please help us build the Portland conference. Register, donate. Links are down below. Very, very, very good. Oaxaca, Mexico. Leaf, right? Are you named after Leif Jacobson, right? Leif is a Danish name, right? It's a Norwegian or Danish name, I believe, right? Moonlight Beach, California. Scott S. Jenny from Fremont, California. Jenny Boris. Welcome, Jenny. All CPI comrades who are not in the basement. Damn right, we are not in the basement. Jyoti Brar is great, and Jyoti Brar is going to be there, and it's going to be awesome. It's going to be absolutely awesome. Absolutely awesome. We got Phil. Welcome, Phil. All right, everybody, hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, hit the notifications bell, and I'm going to start answering your questions. So if you have more questions, shoot me a super chat, and I will do my best to give you all an answer. Watching the soccer match that's going on. We call it soccer. I know it's football. It's football or whatever match here. There was a pro-Israeli ad about their team being kidnapped by Hamas. Also, Robbie Schindler also banned Roger Waters from hotels here in Argentina. My God. Yeah, Roger Waters is great. Roger Waters, a rock star who, he's from Pink Floyd. And what's neat is I liked Roger Waters before, I knew his political views, because when I was in high school, I had a good friend. I didn't have a really great time in high school. It wasn't the best time in my life, but I had a good friend. Shout out if you're watching. I know he watches these streams. A good high school buddy who was really into The Wall. And he lent me his DVD. Do people remember what a DVD is? One of these ancient items. They call it DVD. I mean, it's not as old as a record player, not as old as a VHS or an 8-track, but they had this thing called the DVD. And he lent me his DVD of The Wall by Pink Floyd. And I enjoyed watching The Wall. And I think I learned a lot from The Wall, honestly. I feel like The Wall, it's obviously a pretty dark piece, but it's a lot about mental health. It's a lot about trauma. It's a lot about kind of anger at society and stuff. And I feel like The Wall, I needed to see it at that point in my life. I probably would not watch The Wall now. Not a very optimistic piece, and some parts of it are a little bit painful to watch. But I feel like at that point in my life, it was good for me to see The Wall. It was good for me to see The Wall, to help, process and deal with some of the things that were happening in my life. And The Wall was good for me at that time. So I thank Roger Waters for that. And I'm glad that I watched The Wall when I did. So I liked Roger Waters even before I knew his politics. But the fact that he's standing with the Palestinians, the fact that he's standing with Russia on Ukraine, the fact that he spoke to the UN Security Council, right, and basically called out NATO expansionism. I got to cover that UN Security Council meeting where Roger Waters spoke. He was great. He was absolutely great. And I think Roger Waters is a great person. Absolutely a great person. He is not an anti-Semite. He is an anti-fascist. He grew up in a Communist Party family. His father, who died in World War II, was a Communist Party member. His mother was a member of the Communist Party of Britain. He grew up admiring Stalin and admiring the Soviet Union for their achievements in defeating fascism. And, and Roger Waters is a great person in many, many ways. I feel like his art has helped me at different times. So I appreciate his contribution. I absolutely do. I don't listen to his music much these days. If I do listen to any Pink Floyd tracks, it would be Learning to Fly, which is a pretty good track. The song Learning to Fly. That's a pretty good track that they have. All right, we'll talk about it. Learning to Fly. And then there's also, there's some other ones. But anyway, there you go. Learning to Fly is probably his most optimistic, happy song. I wonder if we could play that on here. Would that, Learning to Fly. I wonder if there's a version we could play that won't get me dinged on the copyrights. Is there a version of Learning to Fly that I could play? That would be a good song to play on here, right? Yeah, okay. Well, I don't know. Maybe there's a cover version of Learning to Fly. Because I don't want to. Oh yeah, okay. This is from a tribute band, so maybe I can get away with that. Maybe, I don't know, but that would be kind of cool. That's a happy, an optimistic Roger Waters song that I can play. Let me see. Let me see. I don't want to just, it's not exactly okay. Well, here's a guy playing it. right? This is just a guy playing it with his guitar. I mean, it is kind of an interesting. I'll be curious to see how he pulls it off, right? Because it's a very electrical song. Yeah, we'll play "Learning to Fly." We'll play the Pink Floyd song, Roger Waters' optimistic, happy, "Learning to Fly" song. We'll play that. I've just set it to download. I won't play it. Yeah, I'm not going to play the actual version of it because it'll mess things up. Yeah, Stephanie is right. You know, I'm going to play a kid playing it on his guitar. We'll see how he pulls it off. We will see how he pulls it off. But there you go. There we go. All righty. Any thoughts on presidential candidate Dr. Shiva? I am actually planning to have Dr. Shiva on this show. I've been in touch with his staff, and he's interested in doing an interview on this channel. So I need to get on that. There's a process for arranging it. I have to fill out their forms and stuff. But there's a very good chance, probably after the December conference, I will do an interview with Dr. Shiva. So if there's stuff you guys want me to ask him, once that interview is scheduled, you need to start, sending me questions, etc. Because I there's a very, very good chance that he will be on this YouTube channel. He and I will be having an interview on here, which I'm very excited to do. I just need to get on top of that. I've got like a million things on my mind. I'm traveling in San Francisco, etc. So, not everything can I do at this very moment, but that is one of the things that is on the agenda. So, right. Well, Donald Trump did call me his favorite reporter, right? Who can forget that? I'm Donald Trump's favorite reporter. I interviewed the Green Party candidate, Howie Hawkins, on here. Next thing you know, we've had Jill Stein on this channel before. There's an interview with Jill Stein that somebody did that I posted, a CPI member did out in Boston. That's posted on here. So interviewing presidential candidates is something I will do. Remember, we don't endorse any candidates. That's very important. We do not endorse any candidates, but we will interview them and we will ask them questions. Absolutely. We will interview them and we will ask them questions. So there we go. So I'm going to play. This is a cover. This is a kid playing Pink Floyd's "Learning to Fly," right? Which is one of the Roger Waters tracks I like. So here we go. We'll see how he does.
Into the distance, a ribbon of black stretched to the point of no turning back. A flight of fancy on a windswept field, standing alone, my senses reel. Fatal attraction is holding me fast. How can I escape this irresistible grasp? Can't keep my eyes from the circling skies. Tongue-tied and twisted, just under bound misfit eye. Ice is forming on the tips of my wings. Unheeded warning, I thought of everything. No navigator to find my way home. Unlived and empty and turned to stone. I saw intention that's learning to fly. Condition grounded but determined to try. Can't keep my eyes from the circling skies. Tongue-tied and twisted and a nerve-bound misfit eye. Above the planet, on a wing of prayer, my grubby halo Vapor trail in the empty air. Across the clouds I see a shadow fly out of the corner of my watering eye. I dream unfretted by the morning light. Could blow the soul right through the roof of the night. There's no sensation to compare with this. Suspended animation, states of bliss. Can't keep my mind from the circling skies. Song-tied and twisted, just a nerve-bound despair.
Alrighty. Yeah, that's a Pink Floyd track that I enjoy. So there we go. I found a version of it that I could get away with playing. I guess somebody's saying that's not actually a Roger Waters song. So someone suggested I play Wish You Were Here, which is another great track. And is that one a Roger Waters song? I don't know my Pink Floydology well enough, but I can put that on for later. I think we can do Wish You Were Here too, because that's a great song. That's a great piece of music as well. So we can do Wish You Were Here. And that song is all over YouTube. My God. I just typed that in and you have no idea how many versions of Wish You Were Here there are. So we can put that one on as well, right? Let me just find a version that doesn't have millions of views, because that would be the ones that would give me problems. But yeah, Wish You Were Here is a great song. A very, very good song. I've always liked Wish You Were Here. And I believe that's written about Syd Barrett, if I'm not mistaken, right? Syd Barrett, who was originally part of Pink Floyd, and then he had LSD. LSD kind of made him go crazy or something. And it sounds like a love song, but it's actually about him regretting that one of his bandmates couldn't get famous along with them, couldn't be part of their couldn't be part of their band as it continued to be famous. One thing about Pink Floyd, I'll just mention this, and this is something a lot of people don't know. Pink Floyd is extremely popular in Iran. Did you know that? There is a radio station in Tehran that plays nothing but Pink Floyd music 24 hours a day. And because of the fact that Pink Floyd was at the height of its popularity in the early 1980s, when the Iranian Revolution was happening, when the Iraq-Iran War was happening, when the hostage crisis was happening, for that reason, Pink Floyd has just caught on in Iran. And many Iranians of all ages love Pink Floyd. It is, and I learned that when I was in Iran, that the Iranians love Pink Floyd, and the fact that Roger Waters, is critical of Israel, I'm sure that helps, because Israel is considered their enemy. The fact that Waters is an anti-imperialist, but Iran loves the hell out of Pink Floyd. And I tell that to people, in the United States, they have no idea, but it is very true. Anyone and folks in Iran can attest to this. They can attest to the fact that Pink Floyd is wildly popular in Iran. The Iranians love Pink Floyd. It's interesting how that works. Sometimes there's pieces of American culture, that goes all over the world, and in one part of the world it'll just really hit home. And that's really interesting how that works. But we'll play Wish You Were Here. We'll play that later after I answer a few more questions. Keep the questions rolling in. By all means, give me more to talk about. Why did Trotskyism catch on in the UK more so than in other countries? It seems like many communist groups over there have roots in Trotskyism. Well, there's a couple things there. First things first, is that Trotskyism is primarily a first world phenomenon. There are very, very few third world Trotskyists. There are some. It's not completely unheard of, but there are very, very few Trotskyites in the third world. In the third world, you get Marxist-Leninists, you get Social Democrats, you get Maoists. You don't get Trotskyites in the third world. Now, I know that in Pakistan, there's some Trotskyites that are in the labor unions in Pakistan. There's some Trotskyite groups in India, a little bit, but not much. Latin America, you have like some of these, groups like the MIR in Chile, the Movement of the Revolutionary Left, that were part of the lead up to the coup of Pinochet. They had some admiration for Trotsky, a little bit in Latin America, but overwhelmingly, you just don't get Trots in the third world. It's a first world phenomenon. And it makes sense because it's not tied to any existing country, Trotskyism. It denounces any existing socialist country, largely. And on top of that, its theory of permanent revolution says the West is the best, that the first world is all that matters. If you don't spread communism to the first world, it doesn't matter. So that's, first of all, that's why you're going to see more Trots in Britain than other countries, is because Britain is a first world country. Second reason, in the United States, after World War II, they just crushed the Communist Party USA, smashed it. They couldn't do that in Britain because of the fact that the labor movement in Britain was way more powerful than in the United States. The labor unions were way more powerful. And because of the fact that Britain during World War II, World War II was happening on their soil. Roger Waters was hiding from bombs when he was a kid, and they were hiding in their basements from bombs. And that the feeling that the Soviet Union was a good friend who helped them defeat the Nazis, and the amount of Communist Party members that were high-ranking and in the labor unions was such that they couldn't just crush the Communist Party in Britain, right? They just couldn't do it, right? And that, like, you have no idea, but like during the bombing of London, you often will see images, right? I mean, it's like iconic, right? Very, very iconic. If you ever watch any movies about World War II, they'll show you pictures like this. I'm going to show you this picture. And I learned this story and it blew my mind. But they'll show you pictures like this, right? That during World War II, when they were bombing London, what happened? Well, we've all seen pictures like this. You watch any World War II history piece, you'll see pictures like this of the people using the subways as bomb shelters. Very famous, very famous. What they're not telling you is that the British government tried to outlaw this, and the Communist Party clubs started occupying the suburbs and subways and fighting the police for the right to hide in the subways from the bombs, right? No one ever tells you this, but the only reason those people were able to hide in the subways was because of the Communist Party. The communists arranged for them to be able to hide in the subway. That is just a fact. That is just a fact. The communists arranged for this to happen with their clubs, etc. That is just a fact. So there was deep love for communism among the British people. There was a deep admiration for the Soviet Union, etc. So they couldn't just push straight up anti-communism. So in Britain, yes, British intelligence, you bet, they funded the hell out of Trotskyism. And that Trotskyism was promoted. Trotskyism was promoted because Trotskyism takes the Marxist narrative. It says the Russian Revolution was a good thing. It says the capitalists are exploiting the workers, etc. And it takes the Marxist narrative and it uses it for evil. And it's much more effective if people are already sympathetic to communism and you go up to them and say, communism's evil, blah, 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 they're not going to listen to you. But if you say, oh, we're for communism, but that Soviet Union, that's no good. No, that Soviet Union, they're not real communists. I'm the real communist. And I think the Soviet Union sold out. And I'm just so happen to be on the side of the British imperialism. We're not going to talk about that, right? And that's why Trotskyism proliferated so much in the UK. It was because the left was very strong among the British industrial working class, the British urban working class. The Labour Party had a lot of influence. Socialism was much more popular in Britain post-World War II. And so really Trotskyism didn't really surge until Khrushchev's secret speech, until the 50s. But especially in the 60s, but even in the 50s and 60s, Trotskyism surged in Britain, in ways that it didn't over here because it was an alternative to genuine communism. Trotskyism is so like influential in Britain. There's, if you ever watched like the Monty Python, right? The People's Front of Judea, right? Do people know about that? The classic, the classic Monty Python sketch, the Judean People's Front, Monty Python is this, 1960s, 1970s comedy group, and about many of their jokes are about tiny little Trotskyist groups fighting with each other because it was so well embedded in the culture. It was so embedded in the culture that that they made jokes about them. Because it was just so much a part of culture. I'm not going to show a Monty Python clip on here, but I maintain there were some British Trotskyists that were able to do some good things, like Jerry Healy, right? And Vanessa Redgrave and Jerry Healy, they were able to stand up for the Palestinians at a time that nobody else was. Now, they may have been wrong about the Soviet Union. They may have been wrong about a lot of issues, but they supported the Arab world against the Zionists. So that was very effective. So that's my analysis of why Trotskyism, was a big deal in the UK, why it caught on in the United Kingdom. I would argue that it was necessary. They didn't need Trotskyism over here. They just demonized all communism. Trotskyism is useful, right? Right. What does the Bible say? It says, or what is it? They used to talk about in the Maoist in China, they used to say those who wave the red flag to oppose the red flag, right? Those who wave the red flag to oppose the red flag. And then the book of Revelations in the Bible talks about those who say they are Jews but are not Jews, right? That is what people when they're trying to poison something from within, it's much easier to wave the red flag to oppose the red flag, to say they are Jews but are not Jews, right? This is to preach socialism but practice fascism, right? I've learned the nursery rhyme. The nursery rhyme. The cloak makers union is a no good union. It's a company union by the bosses. Those right-wing cloak makers, they are socialist fakers who play upon the workers' double crosses. The Hillquits, Dubinskys, and Thomases are making the workers false promises. They preach socialism while they practice fascism to preserve capitalism for the bosses. Right? I learned that, right, from an old communist. That was the cloak makers song. The cloak makers union is a no good union. It's a company union by the bosses. Those right-wing cloak makers are just socialist fakers who play upon the workers' double crosses. The Hillquits, Dubinskys, and the Thomases are making to the workers false promises. They preach socialism while they practice fascism to preserve capitalism for the bosses. So there you go. There you go. All right. How does the electoral system work in China and North Korea? Well, they have a one-party state, but actually, technically, China and North Korea are not one-party states. One party dominates. The Communist Party in China, the Korean Workers' Party in Korea dominates, but there are technically a couple other smaller parties in both of those countries. But generally, the way it works is that the candidate, who is the representative, is chosen it's kind of chosen at a meeting of the local party committees that goes on for many, many hours and is very intense. There's a lot of debate and discussion, and that it's kind of very, very competitive who will get to be the nominee of the party. The Communist Party leadership, which is in every neighborhood, you have a party cell. They will get together and they will argue among themselves about who they want to be their representative. And then once the Communist Party has made a decision, that candidate goes up for a vote, and then the public gets to vote yes or no. They can vote to approve the decision, or they can say, no, we don't want this candidate that the Communist Party has put up. And that's generally how it is. The competitiveness, the debate, the wrangling happens in the lead up to the election and in the process of the Communist Party choosing the candidate. And it's not simply people going and dropping a name in a ballot. right, or punching a ballot. It's actually community discussion, right? They have these, the basis of socialist democracy, the reason it was the Soviet Union is there was a council in the Soviet Union, a Soviet, right, an assembly of people who got together and made decisions that carried out the goals of the revolution in a local area. In China, they have peasant associations, worker associations, right? In Nicaragua, citizens' power councils, Venezuela, Bolivarian circles, etc. So, that's generally how these decisions were made, is that there's like broad discussion and engagement among the population. And then the Communist Party officially picks who its candidate is going to be. And then the people can vote yes or no, right? And that, the Communist Party in these countries does have constitutional authority. I mean, it is written into the Constitution as the ruling party. And, these countries are not liberal, open societies. They don't make any pretense of that. I'll never forget one of the best conversations I ever had in Iran was when I was talking to the Iranians, and the Iranians are not Marxists, mind you. They're anti-imperialists, but they're not Marxists. They reject Marxism, but they also reject capitalism. They say not capitalism, but Islam. One of the things they talked about is they said, in Iran, they have elections, but the Islamic government, gets to decide who the candidates are, and they get to approve or disapprove candidates. And they said to me, in America, you have the exact same thing, except instead of it being the Guardian Council, this group of Islamic revolutionary leaders who get to determine and approve the candidates, it's whoever has the most money. And they were right. All right. In America, right, we don't have the Communist Party written into the Constitution as the ruling party. Instead, what we have is a bunch of rich people who, with their wealth and power, decide who the candidates are or not. Well, in these revolutionary countries, they have a group of people that have formed an organization that mobilized millions of people to set up a new system to kick out the imperialists. And when they came to power, they said, look, we're a developing country. We're not at the point, of being the free and open society they have in the West. And we're going to write ourselves into the Constitution that we, the founders, this is our new system. And we are going to make sure that we can approve and direct the way the country is moving. Right. And that's how it is, right? The Chinese Communist Party, the people are involved in decision making on a local level, etc. And they have elections where people can vote yes or no. But at the same time, it's not as free and open because the Communist Party does get the ability to guide their system, right? Just like in Iran, the Ayatollahs get to guide the system, right? Whereas in the West, we're supposed to be free. Anybody can be president, except everyone knows it's not. The rich people guide it anyway. But they rule. They rule by what you call, they rule by what they call, de facto rule. They rule by de facto rule. Hold on. Hold your horses. Hold your horses. Hold your horses. I am streaming right now. But anyway, they rule by default. They rule by default. And that's a lot of how Western capitalism and imperialism works, is they rule by default. The people who already have the money, the people who already are at the center of the world economy, they rule by default. And it's dictatorship if they ever don't get to win. It's dictatorship if they don't get to be at the top of the pyramid. And that's generally the way discourse works. So there you go. There you go. Now, someone's asked me what was the French May. I know it inspired Argentina. I think that generally refers to the general strike of Paris of May 1968. Right, 1968. There was a revolutionary crisis in Spain, a general strike, etc. I assume that is what that refers to. French May refers to May of 1968, when there was a widespread strike and uprising in France, where the labor unions, were leading a strike, and the French Communist Party and various Maoist and Trotskyite groups were in the streets. I believe that refers to May of 1968 and kind of the revolutionary crisis in France that happened that year. That's my understanding of what that refers to. Iran has repeatedly denounced bin Laden. Yeah, and bin Laden considered the Iranians to be Shia apostates. Right? He was a Sunni Wahhabi. He considered Shia Islam to be apostasy, to be a crime against the faith. And Iran backed Assad in Syria to fight against the Wahhabi extremists who were linked to bin Laden. Iran very much, was not in favor of bin Laden. And the basis on which they've allowed 9/11 victims to sue Iran is ridiculous. One of the hostage takers went to the hospital in Iran one time or something. I mean, it's absolutely ridiculous. Iran was not involved in 9/11 in any way. Thank you very much. Thank you, Stephanie. Iran was not involved in 9/11 in any way. And Iran is a Shia Muslim country, and Osama bin Laden is a Sunni Wahhabi who hates Shia Muslims. And Iran was on the opposite side of the Osama bin Laden people in so many different countries. And thank you very much, Stephanie. I do appreciate it. All righty. Why was Anna Louise Strong accused of espionage? Well, Pios, you have to ask in which country. She was accused of espionage in the Soviet Union and in the United States. Now, the basis for her being accused of espionage in the United States was the fact that her name showed up in something called the Venona cables. And this is I see anti-communists reference the Venona cables all the time. And it is such bullshit, right? The Venona cables are some documents that were declassified, some Soviet intelligence communication that was classified during the Cold War. So there were KGB people in the United States that were communicating secretly with some cables with their bosses, and they talked about all kinds of people, right? Because they were, at that point, they were trying to wage a public relations battle. Roosevelt was their ally, and they were constantly looking at different writers and speakers in America who was more sympathetic to the Soviet Union, who was more hostile. And you can bet CIA people do the same thing, right? If there's CIA people in some African country, they're going to keep track of popular writers and entertainers who are pro-American, popular writers and entertainers who are anti-American, right? That's generally intelligence agencies that are trying to kind of covertly push the agenda of their country. They will keep track of different TV personalities, different writers, different speakers, etc., and keep track of who's saying good things about them and who's saying negative things about them. Well, Anna Louise Strong was a famous American writer who was saying good things about the Soviet Union. So her name shows up. Yeah, KGB people were reading her books and talking about it. That doesn't mean she was a spy. That doesn't make her an agent of the Soviet Union. And I see this all the time. So-and-so's name was in the Venona cables. That doesn't make them a spy, right? I mean, and the Venona cables, it is such bullshit. And I have heard this, the Soviet Union, all kinds of Hollywood actors and all that. They weren't all Soviet spies, right? And this is a really, really common trope that you'll get, people like Trevor Loudon will say, well, the Venona cables proved that half of Hollywood was working for the Soviet Union. And it's like, that's not what they said. It means that KGB people in America who were tracking American culture commented on them. Look, there's a famous American woman. She's writing books about the Soviet Union. Do you think the KGB wouldn't talk about that? Of course they would. That was their job, right? Many people said that a lot of what the KGB in America did was read the New York Times, right? After the Cold War. I mean, that was, supposedly, who knows? But apparently a lot of the documents said there were a lot of Soviet agents who just sat in New York City, rented an apartment, had a fake name or whatever, and they read the New York Times every day. And then they would send a message back to Moscow about what the New York Times said. There was a lot of stuff in the Cold War. And so the idea, and now it's like people, they say, oh, according to the Venona cables, it's proof that Anna Louise Strong was a Soviet intelligence officer. No, she was not. Anna Louise Strong was an American writer, and the KGB talked about her, just like they talked about literally hundreds of other people. There are hundreds of American figures that are mentioned in the Venona cables, and no one thinks they were Soviet spies. So that's the first thing. Now, the second thing is, what about the allegation in the Soviet Union? That one is very weird, okay? And that one is very, very weird. And the general interpretation of that I've heard, that, you know, Stalin did kick Anna Louise Strong out of the Soviet Union during World War II. The general interpretation that I've heard is that she was friendly to China, and she was more sympathetic to the Chinese communists than the Soviet communists, and that that there was some kind of fight between the Soviet communists and the American communists. There were divisions beneath the surface, and that she was living in Moscow, but she was seen as being too sympathetic to the Chinese and not to the Russians. That where the Russians and the Chinese disagreed, she was on the Chinese side. And so she got accused of espionage on that basis. But you'll notice they could have executed her for that, right? I mean, if they really believed she was a spy, they would have just executed her. They didn't do that. They just deported her. And then after she died, Khrushchev cleared her of any wrongdoing, and then she was able to go to China. You know, and that many people said when Khrushchev cleared her of any wrongdoing, that was some kind of favor to China, and she lived in China until she died. So that's generally the interpretation that I've heard, right? But you know, the fact that she was accused of being an American spy and deported during World War II, it's weird. It's just weird. You know. It's just a weird story. And then she was cleared of any wrongdoing. And then she went back and she lived the rest of her life in China. So the general theory is that, you know, because Mao really liked her, her interview with Mao, that's, you know, was very famous. Talk with American correspondent Anna Louise Strong. It's like considered one of Mao's major works that's studied. It's where the paper tiger quote comes from. And so because of that, you know, people assume that there was some bad blood between Stalin and Mao. That's the main interpretation. But honestly, I don't know. I mean, and unfortunately, that's when you're in a war, a lot of times there's allegations that get thrown around and there's fighting. And I mean, the saddest thing that I have heard, you know, is how basically when she came back to America, she was pretty much canceled. You know, she was pretty much canceled because the communists all thought she was an American spy and the Americans all thought she was a communist. And so she was just she had a lot of money from her writing. So she traded real estate, and she was kind of a pariah. Communists hated her and anti-communists hated her. And it was very lonely for her. And it's really sad how that happened. And then when Stalin died, she wrote a book defending Stalin, you know, the Stalin era. That was widely studied, and you know, and then her name was cleared. People said that she was innocent, and then she moved to China, and she lived in China for the rest of her life. So it's a strange story, but who knows, right? Who knows what was really going on there? I like Anna Louise Strong's writing. I find her to be very genuine. I mean, she was definitely pro-communist, definitely anti-imperialist, definitely an admirer of Stalin and Mao. So I have no idea what was going on. She was living in Moscow. She was working for the Moscow News, and there was a war. You do remember like 27 million people died in World War II, 27 million. So in circumstances where that many people are dying and there's a war effort and she's a foreigner in that country and she's also talking to the Chinese, but she's also talking to the Russians, and who knows what happened. And it's very sad, right? It's very sad. And, you know, look, there were a lot of people in the USSR who got wrongly accused of being spies and foreign agents, and that happened. I mean, during the 1937 Great Terror, a lot of innocent people got turned in, right? And Grover Furr talks about that in his writing. There were a lot of innocent people who got caught up in that whole mess, right? And there's no point in denying any of that, by the way. There's no point in saying, oh, that's all propaganda. No, everyone admits a lot of innocent people ended up in gulags who shouldn't have been there. A lot, I mean, and there's no point in denying any of this and pretending it didn't happen. We can be honest that, look, bad things happened in the Soviet Union. That doesn't discredit socialism. It just means that, you know, when countries are in those kinds of circumstances, raising themselves up, sometimes mistakes get made. So there you go. I haven't been following that trial. I see that's a whistleblower from Australia who's very famous. I should know more about that. I'm going to dig into that, but I haven't been following it. You know, I've been focused here on the APEC summit, on U.S.-China relations, and preparing for our Portland conference. But it sounds like a very, very important case about a whistleblower. So thank you for bringing that to my attention. And thank you, Stephanie, for your super sticker. Very much appreciated. The origin of the Bircher movement, and where did it go? So the John Birch Society was a group formed in the early 60s, but it was McCarthyists, right? So Joe McCarthy was this member of Congress who made a name for himself. He made a big name for himself as a what do you call it? As an anti-communist, and he was discredited. And it got to the point. So McCarthyism started with the Democrats going after the Roosevelt wing of the Democratic Party, right? That there was a big section of the Democratic Party that had been in favor of relations, continuing a better relationship with the USSR and et cetera. And Henry Wallace and Alger Hiss and people like that all got purged. The Democrats purged their own camp. Then after that, Republicans started attacking the Democrats. 1949, the communists come to power in China. Then the rallying cry between who lost China, and they blamed the Democrats for quote unquote losing China, handing China to the communists, etc. And then on top of that, then after by about 1953, 1954. McCarthyism took a really strange turn, and it started, the U.S. Army, Voice of America, started being accused of being communist. And Joe McCarthy and a lot of middle class kind of people were using anti-communism to target the ultra rich. They accused the Rockefellers of being communists. They accused the wealthiest families, the Morgans, of being communists. And it was like there was a form of anti-communism that was actually anti-establishment. It was a middle-class uprising against the ruling class. And it's at that point that the ruling class kind of turned against McCarthyism, because it was becoming a vehicle for violently suppressing the capitalists, suppressing each other. And that's when McCarthyism started. That's when, what's his name? Oh, goodness gracious. What was his name? The TV host. I can't remember his name. The TV host. I can't remember his name, but he was the guy who went after Joe McCarthy with his late night TV show. It was a late night radio host. Went after him, and McCarthy got outed as being a homosexual, and McCarthy's career started to go south. But there was still a layer of people who really bought into this belief that the ultra-rich people are in bed with the communists, that communism is a Wall Street conspiracy. And so the John Birch Society, John Birch was a CIA agent and Baptist minister who was living in China, who was executed by the communists. And he was considered the first casualty of the Cold War. And so they started a society, the John Birch Society, named after that guy. It was set up in Appleton, Wisconsin, which was the hometown of Joe McCarthy, in honor of Joe McCarthy. And it's just a far right-wing organization. In a lot of ways, it was a multi-level marketing scheme. Basically, if you were in the John Birch Society, you had house parties to sell their books. You had like little cocktail parties. You'd invite all the people in your neighborhood over to your house to buy books, to listen to records. They had audio recordings of speeches, and it was like they had these little after work, evening cocktail parties where you would listen to right-wing ideas. They had the secret book that proved that Dwight Eisenhower was a communist, and they functioned kind of like a secret society a little bit. They claimed there was no secret book. We don't have any evidence that Dwight Eisenhower was a communist. That's a lie. We don't believe that. But yet they did have, they did have a secret book. Wow. They did have a secret book, they claimed. Eventually did. They eventually published it. It was called The Politician, that claimed to prove that Dwight Eisenhower was a communist because Dwight Eisenhower's brother was a member of a church, and that church had opposed fascism in Spain and signed some anti-fascist petitions, I believe was what it was based on. It was just silliness. But the John Birch Society, it was more ideological far-right stuff. Their founding document is called the Blue Book. And the Blue Book, it argues that it invokes, it quotes some, Oswald Spengler, who's a traditional far-right thinker. And it argues that democracy and the republic are at odds with each other. The republic is what America is, but democracy is vulgar mob rule and is communist. And that they argue that they're followers of Plato and the communists are followers of Aristotle. And that actually what's kind of interesting, because Lyndon LaRouche, the LaRoucheist worldview, which talks about Aristotle and Plato also, and also, is critical of and points out how the ultra-rich fund a lot of the fake left. There's a fair amount of Bircher influence on LaRoucheism. I mean, it's kind of, LaRoucheism is a weird mixture of a lot of different things, right? It's a reaction to the synthetic left. It's recognizing the role that degrowth plays and fascism and all of that. And it's also, I mean, there's a fair amount of Bircher kind of worldview mixed in with it. It's like an odd, Lyndon LaRouche was a Trotskyite communist who eventually adopted the theories of Friedrich List and American economy. But then the Bircher worldview that communism is a conspiracy by the ultra-rich, who are actually Aristotelians who believe in democracy, whereas the American Republic was founded by Platonists who believe in the Republic. That's a big part of the Bircher narrative, and that is part of the LaRouchian narrative also. So it's actually kind of interesting. But yeah, the Birchers, it was this kind of ideological right-wing organization that was popular in the 1960s. It kind of started after the 1964 election. Barry Goldwater, who was the Republican candidate, lost. And he lost the election by a lot. And after that, the Birchers started to lose ground, and they started to become less and less relevant. They were banned from Republican gatherings. The rise of neoconservatism was largely an effort to push Bircherism out of the Republican Party. The Birchers, the John Birch Society, they were far right-wing conspiracy theorists who thought communism was a Wall Street conspiracy, and that led them to be against the establishment. They did become Zionists. This is very interesting. Apparently, when they started, there were a lot of Holocaust deniers and Hitler admirers and stuff in it. There's a very famous white supremacist and neo-Nazi named Revillo P. Oliver, who was a member of the John Birch Society. But then they eventually kicked him out, and they support Israel now. About 1968, 1969, the John Birch Society banned any anti-Semites. And they became, believers in supporting Israel. But prior to that, they had a lot of neo-Nazi kind of people, because the basis of Nazism is kill the communists, right? I mean, Nazism is all, communism is an evil Jewish plot. Communism's got to be stopped. The basis of Nazism is anti-communism. And so originally the Birchers had a lot of Nazis among their ranks, but they cleaned them out. Though many people have pointed out, the John Birch Society was much more of a middle-class phenomenon. When you think about far right in that time period, the Ku Klux Klan has generally been very poor white people. Now, there's a lot of rich white people who supported it, right? People who owned hotel chains and others. But generally, the image of a Klansman that people had was a very, very poor white person who hated black people, et cetera. And the John Birch Society, that was doctors, that was lawyers, that was right-wing college professors. That tended to be, kind of wealthier people that were conservative, and were right-wing in their views, but were more intellectual and bookish, right? And the John Birch Society, I mean, I will say, I've got a stack of their literature at home. I've studied them as a trend. I mean, you should know about them. And I believe my grandfather, on my dad's side, he never joined the John Birch Society, but he lived in many different suburbs. My dad's family moved around in the early 60s. And from my understanding, he did go to a few John Birch Society cocktail parties. Like he never joined, he didn't agree with them, but a lot of the people he worked with, he was a salesman, he sold oxygen. And from what I understand, he went to many John Birch Society cocktail parties where they would be there talking about communism. And my grandfather was a Republican. He was a conservative, and he lived in the suburbs in the 1960s. He was from the South, and he apparently went to a lot of John Birch cocktail parties. He never joined, from what I understand, but it was a trendy thing for middle class suburban people in those days to do. The other thing that's interesting is that the John Birch Society. And this is a very interesting thing. The John Birch Society, right, it was this middle-class anti-communist grouping. And that many people have said that the John Birch Society was basically the White Citizens Council. This is interesting, too. Have folks ever heard of the White Citizens Council? right? When the civil rights movement got going, right? You know, obviously there were a lot of white racists that were opposed to it in the South, right? Who didn't believe in it. But the Ku Klux Klan was considered to be, you know, this vulgar, violent, criminal, redneck, white trash organization. So there was this thing called it was called the Citizens Council, right? But everyone knew them as the White Citizens Council, the Citizens Councils that was set up, and they were opposed to racial integration. They now call themselves, they're still around, they now call themselves the Council of Conservative Citizens. And that basically the John Birch Society and the Citizens Councils were very similar to each other. They weren't the same group, but they were very similar in that they were middle class doctors, lawyers, and stuff who didn't like the civil rights movement, who thought Wall Street was part of a communist conspiracy, who thought all the rich people were communists. I don't know. And again, they lost influence by 1964. The fact that Barry Goldwater, who'd been kind of associated with them, was the Republican candidate, and he lost miserably to Lyndon Johnson. At that point, they started losing their influence in conservative circles. You know, but I mean, they're just they're still around. They're a big part of the American far right. Many people have pointed out that it looks like at this point, the John Birch Society is basically a volunteer organization for the FBI. You know, the John Birch Society, like, you know, I mean, they're supposed to be anti-establishment, right? They're supposed to be, but they hate RT. They're obsessed with hating RT. Where do you think that comes from, right? Because Russia is not communist anymore, but yet they're obsessed with hating RT. And that especially in the 70s, as they were just becoming irrelevant, they were going to the FBI and volunteering to spy on communist groups, volunteering to infiltrate communist groups. And that basically the John Birch Society is for people who want to do work for the FBI for free, people that are suckers that just believe in all this anti-communist crap. They go join the John Birch Society and they end up doing volunteer work for the FBI. That's a lot like what Trevor Loudon does with KeyWiki and stuff like that. They're just kind of, they're Americans who are right wing and volunteer for the FBI to track communists, basically. Yeah, it is pretty pathetic. It is, but you know, they think they're fighting the good fight, and they also are convinced, and I mean, they're not completely wrong, that if they do this, right, if they're doing work for the FBI for free, the FBI will be more in line with what they believe. Now, that's not completely right. I mean, at the end of the day, the American state has its own interests, but, you know, I mean, there's something to be said for that, right? That if, you know, there's a group of people that are doing work for the FBI for free, gathering information for them for free, the FBI is going to appreciate that free work they don't have to pay for. But yeah, it is pretty pathetic. And, you know, in my book, Letter to Bob Avakian, you know, I do reveal that Western Goals, which was a private intelligence agency run by the John Birch Society, the Western Goals Foundation, very heavily infiltrated the RCP during the late 1970s. And that Bob Avakian was very, very heavily, you know, his group was being completely manipulated by the John Birch Society. They had agents all over it. There were two very prominent members of the RCP that were actually members of the Western Goals Foundation, which was a John Birch Society private intelligence service that was tracking communists and manipulating their behaviors. And so that's something to keep in mind as well, is that, you know, I mean, it's the far right. You know, look, one time, well, I could tell you some stories, but, you know, and I will say it's worth noting that, you know, a lot of times when you see informants who come around leftist circles, they don't actually work for the FBI. They're doing something like this. They're idiot volunteers. And you see a lot of those, right? Unfortunately, you know, you see a lot of them. I've seen a lot of idiot volunteers like this before. Bircher kind of people who show up at communist meetings pretending they're communists, and they're very obviously not. And, you know, I've seen a lot of that over the years, and it's sad. I mean, you know, I don't know if it happens. I don't think it happens as much anyways. And nowadays, I think now they're more targeting the woke people because they all hate the woke people. They're Republicans. But it used to be back in the Bush years that if you were doing something communist in the United States, you would usually get one or two of these people would come to your events or whatever. And they weren't always easy to track, but sometimes they were very easy to spot. And sometimes they were hilarious, sometimes they were hilarious. They were just completely hilarious in how bad they were at doing their jobs. But they're volunteers, I guess. They're doing it for free. But yeah, I mean, you get some of them come around. When the Workers' World Party, we'd have a conference. I remember a couple of years there were people who just came to like take pictures of the literature tables, like, aha, we got them, and then we'd find the website a few weeks later, Workers' World Party supports gays and Cuba, and they'd have a picture of like us supporting LGBT rights and supporting Cuba, like they got us, or something like that. I mean, it's just stupid. Like at the end of the day, look, in the United States, right, at this time, nobody should be doing anything illegal. No one should be doing anything illegal. So if law enforcement comes around and looks at your organization and sees that you're promoting communism and socialism and, organizing protests and such, and if they come around and they see that, good for them. I mean, they're not going to find anything. We do know they do frame people up and target people, but I mean, if you're innocent and they frame you up, I mean, nothing you do has anything to do with that. You don't want to make it easier for them. But, if you do this kind of work, especially if you're actually anti-imperialist, you're going to be monitored by the government. And informants are going to come around. And in a way, it's a good thing that they come around because they'll see that you're not doing anything illegal. They'll see that you're just normal people. And, and then they'll either go away or they'll keep doing free work for you. Right. And so who knows? Right. Who knows? I mean, at the end of the day, part of the atmosphere that COINTELPRO creates is they want everyone to be very paranoid and think everyone else is an informant. Everyone else is part of a big government conspiracy against them. So it's very important to not fall into that trap, right? That, people come around, they have to do the work, right? They have to help out. If you're going to be part of the group, you got to pay your dues. You got to help out and build the events. But if people come around and they do the work and they're reporting back to somebody, they're pretty soon going to see you're not doing anything illegal. They're pretty soon going to see that there's no story there, and they'll probably leave. So there you go. One thing you do have to be absolutely clear about, and I've always been absolutely clear, is anybody who comes in to your organization and starts advocating violence or illegal activity, they have to be gone. They got to be gone immediately because they've done this. They send people into mosques. They make a few jokes or whatever. No. If somebody comes around your group and is saying, oh, why don't we all do some act of violence or something like that, get them out of there. It doesn't matter. They may be totally sincere and mean what they're saying, but that has to just be made clear to absolutely everybody you work with, that if somebody's going to come around and they start saying, why don't we, get them out of there. Get them out of there. Right? It's just that simple, right? If someone's coming around and saying, oh, why don't we get guns? Why don't we do? Nope. Get them out. Get them out. Right? And yeah, you're right. They might just be a nut, but it's a nut that could get you in trouble. And on top of that, they could very well be an agent provocateur. And that's where you got to draw the line. But as far as this paranoid approach where we, no, and honestly, I will say the security culture of a lot of leftist groups makes it easier for them to be infiltrated. When they create an atmosphere in a group where you're not allowed to ask why the orders are being given, when you're just told to do something. And I mean, why are we doing this? What's the political line there? Don't ask questions. These are your orders from the party. And there's a lot of that goes on, especially in quote Maoist groups. That actually, it doesn't protect the group from being infiltrated. It helps the group be infiltrated because no one's allowed to ask why. And that a lot of these groups in the United States, I mean, it is really stupid. There's a lot of communist groups in the United States that really get into this stupid decoder ring, secret name, and those kind of people, if they, I mean, it actually, that silly paranoid security culture makes it much easier for the government to manipulate and control your group because people are afraid to ask questions. People are just kind of learning to just obey because they don't want to ask. And that actually, generally, if you want to carry out an educational purpose, which is what CPI is, we are an educational organization. We teach people about socialism. We have classes, we have weekend workshops, we have conferences. If you want to carry out the purpose that we do, it's best to be as open and transparent as possible, right? Now, if we were doing something else, right? Obviously, if things at different stages of the struggle, if the American government, if the USA was to go full fascist or something like that, things would be different. But under these circumstances, it's best to organize in an open, transparent way. All right, Facebook just froze Jill Stein out of her Instagram account. God damn it. And Jill Stein, she's critical of the NATO war stuff. And because she went to the RT event in Moscow, they tried to call her a Russian agent. It just shows you the tech monopolies are not our friends. You've got to oppose tech censorship. You must oppose tech censorship. We've got to oppose the monopoly of influence and power that Facebook and Twitter have. God damn it. God damn it. All righty. All right, folks. Well, I'm going to put on the closing music, but I'll be back. Not sure when, maybe tomorrow night, but sometime. I'll be back soon. I guess I'll play Wish You Were Here next time. Yeah, there we go. I'm going to put on the closing music.
Upsurge in the struggle against U.S. imperialism is now emerging throughout the world. Ever since World War II, U.S. imperialism and its followers have been continuously launching wars of aggression. But the people of various countries have been continuously waging revolutionary wars to defeat their aggression. And while the danger of a new world war still exists, and the people of all countries must get prepared, revolution is the main trend in the world today.